respect for truth. When we think of this, we want to think truth is absolutely so important for a couple of reasons. One reason, not the least, is that Jesus has identified himself as the truth. He had said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so to speak the truth is truly then to speak about Jesus. And I sometimes will say this like to people, when you say that 2 + 2 = 4, you're talking about Jesus. When you say that stop signs are painted red, you're talking about Jesus. Because Jesus he didn't have to say, I'm only some of the truths. Right? He says, I am the truth. When we speak the truth, we're talking about Jesus. And so that's where, we remember back to, I think it was class number 2, where we talked about how God has revealed himself in creation. Not just in the special divine revelation of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but just as we look out at the world and we see the world, we come to know God. When we talk about the world, we're talking about then the God who made it, right? So when we speak the truth, no matter what it is, we're talking about Jesus. And so we're called to bear witness to the truth. Jesus says this, you are called to bear witness to the truth. And when we use that word witness, we can think the Greek word is, everybody happens to know, you guys are Greek scholars, I know. The Greek word for witness is, it starts with an M. There's The Greek word is martyr. So a martyr is one who witnesses to the truth through the shedding of his blood. And so throughout the centuries, we've seen men and women who were willing to bear witness to the truth of who Jesus was and what God had done for them, even to the point of shedding their blood. This is how seriously different Christians have taken this duty to speak the truth, right? We can think, for example, so many martyrs under the Roman Empire. They were told, if you would but worship these false gods in addition to your Christian God, you don't have to stop worshiping your Christian God, just also worship our false Roman gods, we'll let you live. But they said that would be a lie. I'm not going to pretend like these false gods are gods and lie. I will bear witness to the truth that there is only one God, even if that means I'm going to be witnessing by dying. And certainly saints have done this for centuries. We see, and we are so inspired by the lives of these martyrs who bear witness to the truth, who bear witness to Jesus. I think, for example, one of the beautiful ones is the story of I want to say it's the Theban, I don't know what the word is, regiment or something, brigade or group. I want to say it was 30 soldiers who were all of them were Christian. And they were, they'd been outed, you're all Christian. And so the other soldiers in the group said, you guys have to die now because we're not letting any Christians serve in the military. And so they took them to a frozen over pond. And they said, you all get on the frozen pond, take off your clothes, get on the frozen pond, we're going to let you die by exposure. Meanwhile, these soldiers, they had been fighting hand in hand together, so they're like, we kind of don't want to kill you, right? So what did? They said, let's build a big bonfire on the edge of the pond, and we'll all stay warm. And if you want, come and join us at the fire. But by joining us at the fire, you're saying you're no longer a Christian. We won't really even ask questions, just join us by the fire. That's your way of saying you're a Christian. I mean, you're not a Christian, you're with us. You're part of our army, and we can keep being, military together. Because military guys, they kind of respected each other. So there's the 30 guys. They're naked and cold, and they're freezing to death. And there's the fire. Well, the one guy he gets scared, and we're going to have pity on him, right? But he runs from the group and huddling on the ice. He runs towards the fire. As he's running towards the fire, he falls down. He's dead. But one of the other soldiers, seeing the 29 now, there were 30 now. There's 29. Seeing the 29 soldiers witnessing, said, they're willing to die for this guy, Jesus. I want to be part of them. And he takes off his armor and he joins them. And so the 30 are restored to the 30 number, and they die and they're all martyrs. So a wonderful little story that just really inspires me, at least, to think, what am I willing to do to speak the truth? What am I willing to do to be witness to the truth of who God is and what he has done in my life and how he's calling me to live my life differently? So we want to think, what is the truth? So certainly we've already said Jesus identified himself as the truth, but we can also define truth as a statement that corresponds to reality, right? Truth is a statement that corresponds to reality. And so the traditional Catholic teaching would say that when we speak the truth, it means that we're speaking in conformity with the mind, which would then hopefully be in relationship to the reality that our mind has encountered, usually through the senses. Yes? Is this too philosophical? Okay. Okay. We can get very philosophical when you start talking about truth. And this becomes really a bedrock for human society. If the functioning of a society presupposes that men can tell the truth to one another, and when we speak to each other, we're conveying truth. Like it wouldn't work if I say to you, like I'm selling you this carton of milk, and you say, is it nut-free milk? And I say yes, but actually I was processing the milk with my peanuts, and now you drink it and you die. Like society quickly falls apart if there's no truth, right? We can all see that very quickly. I didn't even use cookies that time.
Didn't they use George Washington as an example? I cannot tell a lie.
Right,
About cutting down the Christmas tree. Or cherry tree, I guess.
Cherry tree, but close enough. Kind of like we could have used the cherry tree.
Times have changed.
Right, but the idea that George Washington would make the great president because he was a man of virtue, a man who they knew we can trust him to do the right thing as the new leader of our world, because he's an honest man, he's a true man. They said the same thing about Abraham Lincoln, right? He was an honest man. So offenses against truth. Christian disciples, we Christians were called to put away falsehoods. That's what St. Paul specifically says in his letter to the Ephesians. He says, put away falsehood, because he recognizes that in society people lie all the time, right? I remember I was talking about truthfulness to my high school kids in my last parish. And as I'm talking about it and explaining it, the one kid raises a hand and says, yeah, okay, Father, but everyone lies. Like, immersed in the world, this teenager is just convinced that everyone lies. And it's like, okay, everyone in the world lies. St. Paul says, put away falsehood. Embrace the truth. This is what it means now to be a Christian, is to not be like the lies of the world. And we know that the world lies because the world belongs to the devil. And the devil, Jesus explicitly says, he is a liar and the father of lies. And so when we choose to speak lies, who are we claiming to be our father? And whom do we want to call our father? One who speaks truth. And so every time we open our mouth, we have an opportunity to lay claim to one fatherhood or the other. That's what I think is so absolutely amazing. When before the crucifixion, when Pilate stands up and he presents Barabbas and Jesus, right? Barabbas, the Hebrew there, what does it mean? Well, we know Bar means son, Abba, of the Father. So you have the Son of the Father, or do you want the Son of the Father? Which do you choose? And we certainly know the way that the world chose. But we also want to think, which way am I going to choose, right? So choosing to speak the truth is so important. And it's something that really does, like the world we live in is just filled with lies. And we have to choose constantly to root them out because they just jump into our lives. So we can think sins against the truth. One, obviously, bearing false witness, right? Where you make a statement contrary to the truth told in court, such that somebody now is going to get a lack of justice because of your lie. Did Bob, or did you see Bob murder the guy? And you say, yes, I did. No, you didn't. But you say, yes, I did. Now Bob gets the death penalty because of your lie. Like, clearly, bearing false witness in court is going to be pretty bad, right? But we want to think it's more than just in court, where we would call that specifically a special type of lie. We'd call it perjury. But we'd also say, well, anytime we're speaking in public, even if we're not under oath in court, right? We still want to be speaking the truth. Even if haven't raised your hand to swear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Like you still want to be speaking truth when you're in public. Especially when, by lying, you're going to harm an innocent person. We'd also want to think part of bearing witness to the truth is going to have to do with honoring people's reputations, that they have a right to their reputation. So we could sin against the truth in a way that we could call rash judgment. Rash judgment. And rash judgment is an assumption. We assume something is true without sufficient reason. And it usually has to do with about the moral faults of somebody else. So, let's just say, I'm going to pick on you, Frank, because I feel safe with you. That I just look at him, and I'm just like, you know what? He just strikes me as trying to decide your moral fault. let's go with it.
There's a bunch of them, Father.
There's a bunch of them. But I want to do it without sufficient reason. So I'm going to say, when you guys look at him, don't you just see him and you just think, now that man, he is an adulterer. I think he's the kind of guy who, he probably just sleeps with a different woman every day. You know, like, and I'm just going to assume this, and I'm going to now interact with you as if this is true. This would be rash judgment. I have no reason to think that about Frank, right? But if I just assume this about him based off of whatever inadequate reasons, I'd be guilty of rash judgment. I could also now make it another sin. I could sin of calumny by now telling all of you about Frank the adulterer. But what if, that'd be calumny. That's also, it would be slander in court. But outside of court, we could still call it a sin, right? But what if it's something I know that's true? Let's just say that Sophie here, privately, just the two of us privately, she had just happened to tell me, you know what, Father? I've been feeling guilty because I've been cheating on my math for many years. And I actually don't deserve to be in calculus, but I am because I cheat. I don't know what to do. But now let's say I'm going to tell all of you, you know what? Sophie cheats in math. Is it true? Yes. But now I'm guilty of the sin we would call the sin of detraction. When I have, for no reason, deprived Sophie of her good reputation. Even though it's true, I didn't need to tell everyone here. Now, if Sophie says, Father, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, will you help me go to my teacher? Okay, well then I have a right to talk to the teacher. She's given me that permission, right? But do I have a right to tell everyone in the class? No, that would be the sin of detraction. Even though it's true, it's still an offense against honesty. Because she has a right to having a good reputation, and private sins don't need to be made public.
But Father, if Sophia was in the confessional and she said that she was cheating on the math, I guess you could say, well, those sins could add up. They could even multiply.
Well played, well played. Another form of sinning against truth, and some of these aren't by nature super heavy, but there's still things that we want to kind of look at and try to root out of ourselves, would be like flattery. When we just constantly praise people that's not in a way that's not true. Because one, you can think it's an offense against truth, it's not true. But two, it does ultimately undermine society, because then when you actually praise somebody for something that is legitimate, they're not going to believe it, right? Because they're going to, or it can also be a sin if, let's just say, who have I not picked on today? I'm so mean. It's more fun though if you make it personal, than if I talk about, Harry and Sally. So let's. I'm sorry. But if you don't correct somebody who's doing something wrong, and you just flatter them, you're like, oh, you're such a good person. You're doing fine. You're trying your best. But you're helping them then to continue to become a bad person, habitually doing the wrong thing over and over again. You're just trying to be kind, but what are you actually doing? Through your words, you're saying you're fine, but they're not. Or you're telling them like, oh, it's really no big deal, when it is. Your words are now leading them to a bad place. You see, so be careful with that kind of flattery, or being complacent and compliant with other people. Another kind of sins against truth, you can think bragging. Certainly to a degree, it can just be meant as a joke. In which case, are we allowed to joke? Yes. Is it a sin for an actor to get on stage and say, "Hi, I am George Washington," and no, everybody knows that he is not George Washington. He's not lying by saying he's George Washington, right? We're all in agreement. He's acting. So and in telling a joke, if I don't know, if part of the joke is you have to say something that's not true, telling jokes is allowed. But St. Thomas would caution us and say we want to make sure that we use jokes in the proper amount. And we can all think of that person maybe who always jokes to the point where you no longer know if anything they say is true. You know, they've gone beyond a temperate use of joking, such that now you can see how it did become a problem, right? So we don't want to be puritanical and say we can't have fun, we can't joke. No, we can joke, but we want to make sure that it's a moderated use, so that people still know when we're being serious, when we're being true. And certainly people in relationships can fall into this, right? They always joke, and then inside the relationship, well, are you honest this time or not? We can also think within that as well, sins of sarcasm. You know, the Greek there, do you guys know the Greek of sarcasm? It means eating the flesh. And isn't that kind of what sarcasm is, right? It's like it's a flesh-eating word. And so too much sarcasm would certainly be an offense against truth, right? You know, oftentimes it's really just a passive-aggressive way to insult somebody. Now, to a degree, some of these things can be funny, in which case are they allowed? Yes. But when it's too much, it's no longer funny. It's really just a sin against truth. So, lots of things to kind of think about. Irony in the same way. A little bit of irony can be funny. Too much irony, it's really a sin against truth, right? So, the other kind of lie that people always ask about is, what about the... Michelle, I'm sure you're going to ask. I can just tell that you would probably ask this question. What about the little white lie?
Oh,
Right? People like to ask that. What about the little white lie? A lie which doesn't really do anybody any injury. It's just kind of the lie of an excuse, or the lie to be told to benefit somebody else. And we can think, so certainly it wouldn't be a mortal sin, but it would probably be a venial sin. It would probably be a venial sin to have a little white lie. And so it really ought to be avoided. Sometimes can you find yourself in a situation where you're really not sure what to say? Well, sometimes you better to keep your mouth shut. Which I know I don't do, but I have to go to confession too. Because those little white lies can engender within the person a disrespect for the truth in general. And after you've made all those little white lies, it's a lot easier then to make the big lie. And that's exactly what venial sins are, right? Is they're not by themselves a relationship-ending sin, but they make it a lot easier to then cross that line in the sand of, now I know what God wants, I'm not going to do what God wants, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to leave God to go do my will. Not thy will, Lord, but my will be done. Oh, I've sinned. So, questions, comments, debate, discussions, arguments, qualms, conundrums, concerns, queries, confusion about lying, cheating, stealing. Lying is always wrong. Lying is always wrong. There are situations where we need to use what we could call guarded speech, right? There's certainly situations where we might struggle with what to do in terms of our speech, but we want to think principle. Lying is always wrong, because I want to bear witness to the truth. Because as I bear witness to the truth, I'm bearing witness to the reality, and the reality of who God is, who God has made me to be, and the work that He is doing in my life. Yes, questions? All right. So we could talk about a lot about this, and so since I don't have time to talk a lot about this, we could also look at it in the Catechism. One just last little thought on this. We can also think not just in speech, but also in action. Can we be dishonest in action? And not only in word and action, also in thought. Can we lie to ourselves inside our minds? Can we constantly be saying things to ourselves, that internal dialogue, things that aren't true, and we think it doesn't hurt anyone? Probably hurts you. And in hurting you, is it hurting everyone else? Yes. So we want to try to clear out those negative thoughts, because maybe you're like, I'm not saying it to somebody else. Yeah, but if you're saying it inside your head, is it changing you? It certainly is. So, can be a sin against, and so we want to try to make sure that our thoughts that are rooted in reality. And then just the third kind of beauty and art is a way of communicating. And we want to make sure that beauty and art is then also rooted in truth. So you can see how it can just mushroom out from a very small kind of idea. Respect truth. Do not bear false witness. And it can really mushroom out to encompass these 10 commandments. We've covered them all now. they really do encompass everything of our life as they kind of expand. And so, a mistake that sometimes people make is to say, well, I didn't, lie in court. I didn't bear false witness against my neighbor. I didn't steal. Therefore, I haven't sinned. It's like, yeah, but have you done any of these other things that are kind of offenses against those? In a way, and that's why I started this off. I think when we talked about the sacrament of confession, I gave you those examinations of consciences. You guys remember them, where it takes each of the 10 commandments and it kind of expands it. That can be such a helpful way for you to kind of examine yourself and say, okay, I know the 10 commandments, but am I really living according to those principles in all aspects of my life? Because our Lord Jesus is calling us to turn away from sin and to unite our life to His life so that His life shines more brilliantly in our life so that others might see the good that we're doing and therefore give glory to the God who has created them, loves them, and desires for them also to share in this relationship of truth, joy, and goodness. So thank you all, and I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful start to Lent with Ash Wednesday on Wednesday. If you didn't get a little book,